The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a desperate scream. Ambassador Zethkar of the Rilken Republic clutched his communication device with trembling claws as he watched the HFY War fleet approach his dying ship. The sleek black vessels moved like predators through space, their weapons already charging for what would surely be the final strike. "This is Ambassador Zethkar of the Rilken Republic," he spoke into the transmitter, his voice barely steady. "We are under attack by HFY forces. Our ship is critically damaged. We need immediate assistance from any friendly vessels in the area." The communication officer, a young Rilken named Pexti, looked up from her station with fear in her large, dark eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple ships responding to our distress call. The signatures are unusual." Zethkar's heart sank. Unusual usually meant more bad news in this corner of the galaxy. The HFY had been systematically destroying anyone who opposed their expansion, and most civilized species had learned to avoid getting involved in conflicts with them. "How many ships?" he asked, already preparing himself for disappointment. "Sir, the sensors are having trouble getting an accurate count. The energy signatures are massive, but the formation is strange. They're coming from the direction of the restricted zone." The restricted zone. Zethkar felt a chill run down his spine. That was where the humans lived. The strange, violent species that had appeared in galactic affairs only 50 years ago, after developing faster-than-light travel with shocking speed. Most species took centuries to develop such technology safely. Humans had done it in decades, and their ships reflected this reckless approach to engineering. "Are you certain they're responding to our distress call?" Zethkar asked. Before Pexti could answer, the communication array crackled to life. A deep voice filled the bridge, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. "Rilken vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Relief is coming." The bridge fell silent. Every Rilken crew member turned to look at their ambassador with expressions of confusion and terror. The humans were coming. The humans, whose reputation preceded them like a storm front, whose military actions were spoken of in whispers throughout the galaxy. "Admiral Chen," Zethkar managed to say, "we appreciate your response, but we should clarify. We are under attack by a full HFY war fleet. 12 ships, heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts. Our request for aid might have been poorly worded. We're not expecting anyone to engage such a force directly." There was a pause on the other end of the transmission. Then, what sounded distinctly like human laughter. "Ambassador, did you send out a general distress call requesting immediate military assistance?" "Well, yes, but then, you're getting military assistance." Chen out. The communication went dead, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Through the viewscreen, the HFY fleet continued its approach, weapons charging with ominous energy. Zethkar could see the flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Iron Fist, leading the formation. Commander Thekvar was known throughout the galaxy as a ruthless tactician who had never lost a battle. "Sir," Pexti called out, her voice trembling. "I'm reading massive displacement signatures. Something big is coming out of hyperspace." The space behind them began to shimmer and distort. Then, reality seemed to tear open as ship after ship emerged from faster-than-light travel. But these weren't just any ships. These were human warships, and they kept coming. The first to emerge was a massive dreadnought, easily twice the size of the largest HFY vessel. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light, and weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator. Behind it came cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and ships of classes that the Rilken sensors couldn't even identify. "How many?" Zethkar whispered. Pexti's claws flew over her console. "I count 40, no, 60 ships." "Sir, they're still coming. The displacement signatures are getting stronger." More ships emerged from hyperspace. Massive carrier vessels that dwarfed entire space stations. Battleships bristling with weapons that looked like they could crack planets. Support vessels carrying supplies and equipment for what looked like a full-scale military campaign. The HFY fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming moments before, suddenly looked very small against the backdrop of the human armada that was still materializing around them. "Admiral Chen to Rilken vessel," the human voice crackled through their communications again. "You might want to move away from the combat zone. This is about to get messy." Sethkar found his voice. Admiral, we only asked for assistance. We never expected this. Ambassador, when someone asks the Terran Federation for military aid, we take that seriously. You called for help, and help is what you're getting. Now please clear the area so we can work. The Rilken ship's engines, damaged as they were, managed to push them away from the confrontation zone. As they retreated, Sethkar watched in fascination and horror as the human fleet arranged itself into a formation that looked both beautiful and terrifying. On the Vorthak flagship, Commander Thekvar was experiencing emotions he had thought himself incapable of feeling. Fear was not something that came naturally to a Vorthak warrior, but the sight of over 200 human warships arranging themselves in perfect battle formation was enough to give even him pause. Communications, he barked to his subordinate, open a channel to the lead human vessel. The massive dreadnought that had emerged first from hyperspace filled their main screen as the communication link was established. A human face appeared on the display, weathered and scarred, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to look right through the Vorthak commander. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. You are in violation of the Galactic Peace Accords by attacking a diplomatic vessel. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Thekvar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a sneer among his species. Human, you are outnumbered and outgunned. 12 of the finest Vorthak warships against your collection of scrap metal. Withdraw now and we will allow you to leave with your lives. The human's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. Commander, I think there might be some confusion here. You seem to think you're facing 12 ships against one fleet. Let me clarify something for you. Admiral Chen gestured to someone off-screen, and, suddenly, the Vorthak sensors lit up like a festival display. Ship after ship was powering up weapons systems, and the energy readings were unlike anything the Vorthak had ever encountered. We currently have 237 combat vessels in this sector, Admiral Chen continued calmly. This includes 12 dreadnoughts, 43 battleships, 62 heavy cruisers, 78 destroyers, and 42 support vessels. Each ship is equipped with weapons systems that your intelligence reports have grossly underestimated. The bridge of the Iron Fist had gone completely silent. Thekvar could hear the breathing of his crew, something that should have been impossible over the ambient noise of ship operations. You attacked a diplomatic vessel, Admiral Chen said, her voice cutting through space like a blade. That vessel called for aid. The Terran Federation has answered that call. You now have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system, or we will demonstrate why humans have a reputation for being unreasonably violent. Thekvar looked at his tactical display. The human ships were arranged in a formation he had never seen before, with overlapping fields of fire that would make any attack against them suicidal. More troubling was the energy reading from their weapons. The humans appeared to have developed technology that the rest of the galaxy considered theoretical at best. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, their lead ships are charging weapons. The energy output it's impossible. Those readings can't be correct. But they were correct. Across the human fleet, weapon systems were powering up that drew energy from sources the Vorthak couldn't even identify. The space around the human ships began to shimmer with barely contained power. 20 seconds, Admiral Chen announced. Thekvar was a warrior. His entire species prided itself on never backing down from a fight. But he was also not stupid. The humans had responded to a simple distress call with a force large enough to conquer entire star systems. This was not a species that bluffed or made empty threats. Tactical, he said quietly, begin withdrawal procedures. Sir? You heard me. All ships, begin immediate withdrawal from this system. We're leaving. As the Vorthak fleet began to turn away, Admiral Chen's voice came through their communications one more time. Commander Thekvar, the Terran Federation will be filing a formal complaint with the Galactic Council about this incident. Any further attacks on diplomatic vessels will result in a more permanent solution to this problem. Have a pleasant day. The human fleet watched as the Vorthak ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared into hyperspace. Only then did Admiral Chen turn her attention back to the damaged Rilken vessel. Ambassador Zethkar, this is Admiral Chen. Do you require assistance with repairs or medical aid? Zethkar stared at the communication device for a long moment before responding. Admiral, we never expected, when we sent the distress call. Ambassador, when someone asks for help, we help. That's just who we are. Now, do you need repairs? Yes, our engines are damaged and we have several injured crew members. Understood. The medical ship Florence Nightingale will dock with your vessel in 10 minutes. Our engineering teams will have your ship operational within the hour. After that, we'll escort you safely back to Rilken space. As the massive human fleet began to move into escort formation around the tiny Rilken diplomatic vessel, Sethkar realized that his government was going to have some very serious conversations about humanity in the near future. A species that responded to a simple request for help by sending nearly 250 warships was not a species to be underestimated. Pexti, he said quietly to his communications officer, prepare a full report for the council. Include everything. The response time, the size of the fleet, the weapons readings, everything. Sir, what should I tell them about the humans' intentions? Sethkar watched through the viewscreen as human technicians began boarding his ship to help with repairs, their efficiency and professionalism evident in every action. Tell them that we accidentally discovered something very important about humanity. When they promise to help, they mean it. All of it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of receiving Ambassador Sethkar's report. Representatives from 43 different species filled the Great Chamber on the neutral world of Consensus Prime, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones as they discussed the implications of what had just occurred. Chancellor Vexera of the Altarian Assembly called the session to order with a resonant tone that echoed through the chamber. Her species, one of the oldest in the galaxy, had seen empires rise and fall over millennia, but even she seemed shaken by the report they had all received. Fellow representatives, she began, her translator converting her melodic speech into galactic standard, we are here to discuss the human response to the Rilken distress call. Ambassador Sethkar, please present your account to the council. The Rilken ambassador stepped forward, his usual composure replaced by something that looked distinctly like shell shock. Honored representatives, what I witnessed yesterday has fundamentally changed my understanding of human military capabilities. When our diplomatic vessel sent out a standard distress call, we expected perhaps a patrol ship or two to respond, if anyone responded at all. He activated a holographic display showing sensor readings from the encounter. The chamber fell silent as the data revealed the true scope of the human response. Instead, the Terran Federation deployed what can only be described as a full invasion fleet. 237 combat vessels, including weapons platforms we have never seen before. Their response time suggests they mobilized this force and reached our location in under 6 hours. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Representative Kektesh of the Zephyrian Confederation raised one of his 4 arms. Ambassador, you're suggesting that humans maintain a military force of this size on standby? For emergency response? Not just maintain it, Sethkar replied. They deployed it without hesitation. Admiral Chen spoke as if sending nearly 250 warships to answer a distress call was routine procedure. The implications hung heavy in the chamber. Every species present had their own military forces, but nothing approaching the scale of what the humans had just demonstrated. More troubling was the casual nature of the deployment, as if the Terran Federation had fleets of this size scattered throughout their territory. Councillor Threxma of the Hegemony Defense Council, a massive insectoid being whose species prided itself on military efficiency, spoke next. The weapons readings in your report, Ambassador. Our analysts believe there may be errors in the sensor data. I thought so too, Sethkar admitted. But I had our sensors checked and recalibrated 3 times. The readings are accurate. Human ships appear to be equipped with power sources that shouldn't be possible with current galactic technology. Dr. Yolandra, the Council's chief scientific advisor, materialized her holographic form in the center of the chamber. As a pure energy being, she could process data faster than any organic species, and her analysis was always valued. I have reviewed the sensor data, she announced in her synthesized voice. The power signatures are consistent with controlled matter-antimatter reactions on a scale previously thought too dangerous for ship-based applications. If accurate, these readings suggest human vessels carry enough destructive potential to level continents. The chamber erupted in concerned discussion. Representative Quaresh of the Peaceful Trading Collective, whose species had avoided conflict for over 1,000 years, spoke in barely contained panic. You're telling us that humans have built a fleet capable of destroying entire worlds, and they're flying around the galaxy offering to help people? It appears so, Sethkar confirmed. But, here's what truly concerns me. When Admiral Chen spoke to Commander Thekvar, she mentioned this was just the force they had available in our sector. She implied there were other fleets elsewhere. Chancellor Vexera felt a chill run through her crystalline form. How many fleets do they maintain? We don't know. But, based on their territorial expansion over the past 50 years and the infrastructure we've observed, our intelligence estimates suggest they could have dozens of fleets of similar size. The silence that followed was deafening. Every representative was calculating the same thing. If humans had dozens of fleets, each capable of overwhelming any known military force, they weren't just another spacefaring species. They were potentially the dominant military power in the galaxy, and no one had realized it. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship that was escorting the Rilken vessel home, Admiral Chen was having a very different conversation with her staff. Admiral, Commander Rodriguez said as he reviewed deployment reports, the Council is probably having fits about this. We showed up with the entire 4th Fleet. Admiral Chen poured herself a cup of coffee, a human beverage that had become somewhat legendary among alien species for its apparent ability to keep humans functional under any circumstances. Miguel, they sent out a distress call asking for immediate military assistance. What were we supposed to do? Ignore it? Maybe send a cruiser squadron instead of 250 ships? And if it had been a trap? Or if they needed evacuation from a planetary disaster? We went in prepared for anything. She took a sip of her coffee and looked out at the stars. Besides, sometimes it's good to remind the galaxy that we take our responsibilities seriously. Lieutenant Commander Park, the fleet's intelligence officer, looked up from her reports. Admiral, we're getting some interesting chatter on Galactic Council frequencies. Apparently, our response has caused quite a stir. How much of a stir? They're analyzing our power signatures and trying to figure out how many fleets we maintain. Some species are suggesting we might be a threat to galactic stability. Admiral Chen laughed, a sound that had become familiar to her crew over their years of service together. A threat to stability? We just prevented an unprovoked attack on a diplomatic vessel. If that threatens their stability, maybe they need to reconsider their priorities. Back on Consensus Prime, the emergency session was reaching a critical point. Representative Zorthak of the militant caste, whose species had once dominated their entire sector through military might, stood to address the chamber. Fellow representatives, his translator rendered his guttural speech, we must face facts. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our collective forces. The question is, what are their intentions? Their intentions seem clear, interrupted Representative Melandra of the Harmony Coalition. They responded to a distress call and protected a diplomatic vessel. These are the actions of a benevolent species. Or, Zorthak countered, the actions of a species demonstrating their power. They could have resolved that situation with a fraction of the force they deployed. Ambassador Zethkar stepped forward again. If I may, representatives, I spent several hours observing the human crew during repairs. Their behavior was enlightening. How so? Chancellor Vexera asked. They treated our wounded with the same care they would their own crew. Their engineers worked around the clock to repair our ship, refusing payment or compensation. Admiral Chen personally ensured that we had safe passage home. These were not the actions of conquerors or people making a show of force. But surely they must have some agenda, pressed Representative Kektesh. No species deploys such overwhelming force without political motivation. Zethkar considered this carefully. I asked Admiral Chen directly about their response. She seemed genuinely confused by my question. When I explained that we hadn't expected such a massive deployment, she said something I'll never forget. The chamber waited. She said that when someone asks for help, you give them the help they need, not the minimum you can get away with. She said it's just who they are. Dr. Yolandra processed this information at light speed. If this philosophy guides their military doctrine, it explains the scale of their response. They prepare for maximum assistance rather than minimum engagement. But, what does this mean for galactic politics? Asked Representative Koresh. If humans maintain dozens of fleets of this size, they could single-handedly tip the balance of power in any conflict. Chancellor Vexera had been silent during much of the discussion, processing the implications of humanity's display of military might. Finally, she spoke. Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Instead of asking what threat humanity poses, perhaps we should ask what opportunity they represent. The chamber turned toward her. For millennia, our galaxy has been plagued by conflicts like the one the Vorthack initiated yesterday. Species prey upon weaker neighbors, diplomacy fails, and wars drag on for generations. But, yesterday, a diplomatic incident was resolved in hours because someone finally had the power to enforce peace. You're suggesting we should welcome human military intervention? Representative Zorthak asked incredulously. I'm suggesting that maybe the galaxy needs someone with the power to keep the peace. The humans have demonstrated that power, but, more importantly, they've demonstrated restraint. They could have destroyed the Vorthack fleet, but they didn't. They used exactly the amount of force necessary to resolve the situation peacefully. Counselor Threxmaw leaned forward. And if they decide our governments aren't to their liking? If they decide to use that power for conquest instead of peacekeeping? Then, we'll face the challenge when it comes, Chancellor Vexera replied. But, for now, we have evidence of a species with unprecedented military capabilities using that power to protect the innocent. Perhaps instead of fearing them, we should be grateful they exist. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The galaxy had changed. Humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species anymore. They were a force that would shape galactic politics for generations to come. The only question was whether the change would be for better or worse. As the session concluded, Ambassador Zethkar found himself thinking about his brief conversation with Admiral Chen. When he had thanked her for the rescue, she had simply smiled and said, "That's what neighbors do." Perhaps that was the key to understanding humanity. They saw the galaxy not as a collection of competing species, but as a neighborhood where everyone should look out for each other. And they had the power to make that vision reality. Whether the galaxy was ready for that vision remained to be seen. 3 weeks after the Rilken incident, the ripple effects were being felt across the galaxy in ways no one had anticipated. The first unexpected consequence came from the most unlikely source, the Vorthack Empire itself. Commander Thekvar stood before the war council of his species, his usually proud bearing diminished by the shame of retreat. The chamber was a stark reflection of Vorthack culture, black stone walls carved with the history of their conquests, each victory immortalized in blood-red script. "You fled," War Chancellor Drakmail accused, her voice echoing through the chamber like a physical blow. "You fled from battle without engaging the enemy. You have brought shame upon the Empire." "Chancellor," Thekvar replied, struggling to maintain his composure, "I made a tactical decision based on the intelligence available. The human force numbered nearly 250 warships, each equipped with weapons technology superior to our own." "Excuses," spat General Vector from his position at the council table. "The humans are a young species. Barely 50 years in space. How could they possibly, because we underestimated them," Thekvar interrupted, "a breach of protocol that would normally result in execution. We all did. Our intelligence was wrong. Dead wrong." War Chancellor Drakmail studied the tactical recordings from the encounter, her predatory eyes analyzing every detail. The Vorthack had built their empire on superior military technology and ruthless efficiency. The idea that another species could match or exceed their capabilities was almost unthinkable. "These power readings," she said finally. "Your sensors claim their ships generate energy equivalent to small stars. This is impossible." "I thought so too. But our best engineers have analyzed the data. The readings are consistent across all sensors. The humans have developed technology that our science considers theoretical at best." The council chamber fell silent. For a species that had conquered 17 star systems through military might alone, the implications were staggering. "What do our intelligence networks report about human military strength?" Chancellor Drakmail asked. Intelligence Director S.A. Katar activated a holographic display showing human space. "Our analysis suggests they maintain at least 12 fleets of similar size to what Commander Thekvar encountered. Possibly more. Their shipbuilding capacity appears to be enormous." 12 fleets, General Vector repeated slowly. "Each capable of overwhelming our most powerful battle groups." "It gets worse," Director S.A. Katar continued. "Our agents report that humans have been building these fleets for decades while maintaining the pretense of being a minor power. They've been deliberately hiding their true capabilities." War Chancellor Drakmail felt something she had never experienced before: fear. Not just for herself, but for the survival of her entire species. The Vortak Empire had made enemies throughout the galaxy. If humans decided to act as galactic peacekeepers, the Vortak would be among the first targets. What are our options? She asked quietly. We could attempt to negotiate, suggested Counselor Rexani, the most diplomatic member of the War Council. Perhaps offer reparations for the attack on the Rilken vessel. Negotiate? General Vector's mandibles clicked in disgust. We are Vortak. We do not negotiate with lesser species. Lesser species? Commander Thekvar stood suddenly. General, I watched human ships appear out of nowhere like avenging spirits. I saw weapons that could crack planets charging to fire. That is not a lesser species. That is a species that could exterminate us if they chose to. The truth of his words hung over the council like a death sentence. For generations, the Vortak had believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy. Now they discovered they were merely another prey species that had been lucky enough to avoid the attention of the real apex predator. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, humanity was discovering that their act of simple helpfulness had consequences they hadn't anticipated. President Elena Vesquez sat in her office in the Terran Federation capital, reviewing reports from across human space. As the elected leader of humanity's interstellar government, she had expected many challenges in her term. Managing the fallout from accidental galactic intimidation had not been one of them. Madam President, Secretary of State James Wright said as he entered her office carrying a stack of diplomatic communications, we're receiving formal requests for assistance from 17 different species. Apparently, word has gotten out about our response to the Rilken incident. What kind of assistance? She asked, though she suspected she already knew. Border disputes, piracy problems, territorial conflicts, trade route protection. It seems everyone assumes we're now the galaxy's police force. President Vasquez rubbed her temples. And, what's Admiral Chen's assessment of our actual capabilities to respond to these requests? That's the interesting part. According to Fleet Command, we actually could handle most of these situations. Our problem isn't capability, it's deciding whether we should. Meaning? Meaning if we start intervening in galactic conflicts, we become responsible for galactic peace. Are we ready for that responsibility? The question hung in the air. Humanity had developed their massive fleets for self-defense and exploration, never intending to become galactic peacekeepers. But, intentions, President Vasquez realized, mattered less than capabilities when the galaxy was asking for help. Her contemplation was interrupted by her communications officer. Madam President, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Alterian Assembly. It's Chancellor Vexera herself. Put it through. The holographic image of the ancient crystalline being materialized in the office. Despite being one of the oldest species in the galaxy, Chancellor Vexera had never communicated directly with human leadership before. President Vasquez, the Chancellor began, I hope you'll forgive the directness of this communication, but recent events have created a situation that requires immediate discussion. Of course, Chancellor. How can we help? That's exactly what I need to discuss with you. Your species' response to the Rilken incident has fundamentally altered the balance of power in our galaxy. Many species are now looking to humanity for protection and assistance. President Vasquez nodded. We've noticed. We're receiving requests for intervention almost daily. What concerns me is not your capability to respond to these requests, but what happens if you don't? The Vortak incident has demonstrated that there are species willing to attack diplomatic vessels. Without a credible deterrent, such incidents may become more common. Are you asking us to become galactic peacekeepers? Chancellor Vexera paused, her crystalline form shimmering with what might have been uncertainty. I'm asking you to consider that you may already have become exactly that, whether you intended to or not. The question is whether you'll embrace that role or abandon it. After the transmission ended, President Vasquez called an emergency meeting of the Federation Council. The representatives of Earth's continental governments, along with the colonial delegates from Mars, Europa, and the outer settlements, gathered in the Great Hall that had been built to accommodate humanity's growth among the stars. The situation is this, she began, addressing the assembled representatives. Our military capabilities have been revealed to the galaxy, and now everyone wants our help. We need to decide what kind of role humanity will play in galactic affairs. Representative Chen from the Asian Federation spoke first. We built our fleets to protect ourselves. Using them to police the galaxy changes everything. Does it? Asked Representative Jackson from the African Union. We've always believed in helping those who can't help themselves. Isn't this just extending that principle to interstellar politics? Representative Kowalski from the European Alliance leaned forward. The question isn't whether we should help. The question is whether we can help without losing ourselves in the process. Policing the galaxy is a thankless job that could consume our entire civilization. And, if we don't? Representative Nakamura from the Pacific Coalition asked. How many more diplomatic vessels get attacked? How many smaller species get conquered while we stand by and do nothing? The debate continued for hours, touching on philosophy, practicality, and the fundamental question of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of other sentient species. Finally, President Vasquez called for quiet. The reality is that we've already made our choice. The moment Admiral Chan responded to that distress call with a full fleet, we announced to the galaxy that humanity takes requests for help seriously. We can't unmake that announcement. She stood and walked to the great window that looked out over the sprawling capital city. But we can decide how to honor it. I propose we establish the Galactic Peace Initiative. Any species that faces unprovoked aggression can request assistance from the Terran Federation. We'll evaluate each request on its merits and respond accordingly. And if we become targets ourselves? Representative Chen asked. Then, we'll face the challenge when it comes. But I'd rather we face it as a species that stood up for what was right than one that hid behind our own borders while others suffered. The vote was close, but the initiative passed. Humanity would officially become the galaxy's peacekeepers, not because they sought power, but because power had been thrust upon them and they chose to use it responsibly. Back in Vorthack space, War Chancellor Drakmail was reaching her own conclusions about humanity's role in the galaxy. The intelligence reports were clear: humans were expanding their peacekeeping activities, responding to requests for assistance from across the galaxy. They're building an empire, she told her council. Not through conquest, but through protection. Species will align themselves with humanity for safety. What do you recommend? Asked General Vector. Drakmail looked at the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. Everywhere they went, conflicts ended. Pirates disappeared. Border disputes were resolved peacefully. It was the most effective method of galactic domination she had ever witnessed. We adapt, she said finally. The age of conquest through force is ending. If we want to survive, we need to find our place in humanity's galaxy. It was a bitter pill for a proud warrior species to swallow, but the alternative was extinction. Across the galaxy, other aggressive species were reaching the same conclusion. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through war, they had inherited it through the simple act of being willing to help when help was needed. And, perhaps, the galaxy was better for it. 6 months after the Galactic Peace Initiative began, the transformation of interstellar politics had exceeded everyone's expectations. What started as an accidental display of military might have evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary association of species united under human protection. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, now serving as the mobile headquarters for Galactic Peace Initiative operations. Around her, the bridge crew represented a dozen different species, all working together with an efficiency that would have been unthinkable just months before. Admiral, called Lieutenant Zyxera, a former Rilken diplomat who had requested transfer to human service, were receiving a distress call from the Kepler 442 system. The hegemony expansionist fleet is moving against the Botanical Collective. Chen sighed. The hegemony had been one of the last holdouts against the new galactic order, still believing they could expand through traditional military conquest. They were about to learn otherwise. How large is their fleet? She asked. 37 vessels, including 5 dreadnoughts, reported Commander Tesh, whose species had been liberated from hegemony occupation just 3 months earlier. The Botanical Collective has no military vessels. They're completely defenseless. Time to Kepler 442 at maximum burn? 18 hours, Admiral. Chen looked at the tactical display showing human fleet positions across the galaxy. The Peace Initiative now maintained rapid response fleets in strategic locations, capable of reaching any system within days rather than weeks. Signal the 2nd, 5th, and 7th fleets. Have them converge on Kepler 442. I want overwhelming superiority when we arrive. Admiral. That's 143 vessels. The hegemony needs to understand that the age of conquest is over. Make sure they get the message loud and clear. As the orders went out across human space, a similar scene was playing out in dozens of other locations. The galaxy had learned that humanity's promise to protect the innocent was not an idle threat. When humans said they would help, they meant it with the full weight of their vast military machine. On the garden world of Photosynthia, capital of the Botanical Collective, Chancellor Root, who speaks for all, felt the warm sunlight on her photosynthetic skin as she contemplated the irony of their situation. Her people were pacifists by nature, having evolved from plant-like organisms that gained sentience through symbiosis rather than competition. They had never developed military technology, never needed to. Until now. Chancellor, whispered Stem, who carries messages, her aide, the human vessels are approaching the system. Their Admiral Chen wishes to speak with you. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of the human admiral. Root, who speaks for all, had heard stories of human ferocity in battle, but the woman she saw looked more like a protective parent than a warrior. Chancellor, Admiral Chen said, we received your distress call. Human forces are moving to intercept the hegemony fleet. Is your population prepared for evacuation if necessary? Admiral Chen, my people cannot leave our world. We are literally rooted to this soil. If we cannot defend our home, we will die with it. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Chancellor, with respect, that won't be necessary. The hegemony fleet will not reach your world. You have my word. Root, who speaks for all, felt something she had never experienced before, hope backed by power. For the first time in their species' history, someone with the strength to protect them actually cared enough to do it. How can we ever repay such kindness, she asked. By continuing to be who you are. The galaxy needs more species like yours, Chancellor. We'll make sure you survive to be an example to others. Meanwhile, aboard the hegemony flagship Conquest Eternal, Admiral Vashtek was reviewing intelligence reports with growing concern. The hegemony had been confident that humanity's protection only extended to species that had formally requested it. The Botanical Collective had never made such a request, believing their pacifist nature would protect them. They had been wrong about human intervention, and now Vashtek was about to discover just how wrong. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we're detecting massive hyperspace disturbances throughout the system. Multiple fleets are converging on our position. How many ships? Sensors indicate, sir, this can't be right. We're showing over 140 human vessels materializing around us. Admiral Vashtek felt his confidence drain away like water through broken stone. The hegemony fleet had seemed powerful when facing defenseless botanicals. Against 3 human fleets working in coordination, they were completely outmatched. Open communication channels to the human vessels, he ordered. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, and her expression was not friendly. Admiral Vashtek, you are in violation of Galactic Peace Accord 7, unprovoked aggression against non-military species. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Chen, the Botanical Collective never requested human protection. They are not under your jurisdiction. Admiral, let me explain something about human jurisdiction. We don't protect species because they ask us to. We protect them because it's the right thing to do. The Botanical Collective has never harmed anyone. They pose no threat to anyone. Your attack on them is an act of pure aggression, and that's something we won't tolerate. Vashtek could see his tactical officers analyzing the human formation. Their faces told him everything he needed to know about their chances in a direct confrontation. You would risk war with the hegemony over a species of plants? Admiral, we're not risking war. We're preventing it. Your choice is simple, withdraw now and file a formal apology with the Galactic Council, or be destroyed where you sit. I'll give you 60 seconds to decide. The bridge of the Conquest Eternal fell silent. Through the viewscreen, Vashtek could see the human fleet arranged in perfect battle formation, their weapons already charging. Energy readings indicated firepower sufficient to vaporize his entire fleet several times over. Signal all ships, he said quietly. Begin immediate withdrawal from the system. As the hegemony fleet retreated, Admiral Chen opened a secure channel to Admiral Harrison of the 5th Fleet. James, make sure they don't try anything clever on their way out. If even one hegemony ship deviates from their withdrawal course, I want it disabled immediately. Understood, Sarah. This is getting easier each time, isn't it? Maybe too easy. I'm starting to worry we're making the galaxy soft. Or maybe we're just showing them what civilization looks like. The withdrawal of the hegemony fleet from Botanical Collective Space marked a turning point in galactic politics. News of humanity's intervention spread quickly through interstellar communication networks, carrying with it a message that resonated throughout the galaxy: the strong could no longer prey upon the weak with impunity. On the trading world of Commerce Central, species that had never spoken to each other before were forming cooperative agreements. The aquatic communion, whose water-world civilizations had been isolated for millennia, began sharing their advanced atmospheric processing technology. The crystalline hegemony opened their mineral-rich worlds to trade with species they had previously considered inferior. The change wasn't just political, it was cultural. For the first time in galactic history, species were cooperating not out of fear or necessity, but because they finally felt safe enough to trust each other. President Vasquez watched these developments from her office on Earth, reading reports that painted a picture of a galaxy transforming itself in ways no one had anticipated. The economic projections are staggering, Secretary Wright told her as he reviewed the latest trade statistics. Interspecies commerce has increased by 400% since the Peace Initiative began. Scientific collaboration has increased by even more. And the military situation? Stabilizing rapidly. The Vortak Empire has formally requested membership in the Galactic Peace Initiative. The hegemony expansionist movement is collapsing as member worlds vote to join the protected territories. Only a handful of aggressive species remain outside the framework. President Vasquez leaned back in her chair. James, did we accidentally conquer the galaxy? I prefer to think we accidentally civilized it. There's a difference. Perhaps there was. Across human space, the debate continued about their role as galactic peacekeepers. Some worried about the burden of responsibility, others about the dangers of absolute power. But the results spoke for themselves: conflicts were ending, trade was flourishing, and species that had warred for generations were learning to cooperate. Back on Photosynthia, Chancellor Root, who speaks for all, stood in her garden watching the stars. Somewhere among those points of light, human fleets moved through space, ready to respond to any threat against the innocent. It was a comforting thought for a species that had never known protection before. Chancellor Stem, who carries messages, approached with the day's communications. We're receiving delegations from 17 species requesting to establish embassies on our world. They want to learn about our agricultural techniques. 17 species, the Chancellor mused. 6 months ago, we had never spoken to anyone beyond our own system. Now the galaxy comes to us seeking knowledge. The humans made this possible, her aide observed. No, Root, who speaks for all, corrected gently. The humans made it safe. We made it possible by being ourselves. That's the lesson here: when the strong protect the weak, everyone benefits. As night fell across Photosynthia, similar conversations were taking place on thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Humanity had responded to a simple distress call with overwhelming force, not because they sought to dominate, but because they believed in helping others. That single act of kindness, multiplied by the vast power they possessed, had transformed the galaxy into something unprecedented: a civilization based on protection rather than predation. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation had begun. And it all started because someone asked for help, and humanity decided to actually provide it. Admiral Chen, now approaching her third year commanding Peace Initiative forces, often reflected on that first encounter with Ambassador Zethkar. A simple distress call had revealed humanity's true nature to the galaxy: they were a species that would rather show up with too much help than too little. Sometimes, she realized, being accidentally overwhelming was exactly what the galaxy needed.